Good morning, good evening, good night, NBN, Entrepreneurship and Leadership.
Personally, I'm fascinated by the story.
Trust is an underrated weapon in the business landscape.
I'm a really strong believer in learning by doing.
What's the definition of success?
You're trying to come up with an answer to the question. But go ahead, Richard.
You could be right, but you're wrong. Good morning, good evening, good night, Entrepreneurship and Leadership channel listeners on the New Books Network. I'm here with my business partner and friend Kimon and our special guest Nick Sonnenberg, who I believe is in the United States. Hi, Nick.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. And Nick is the author of a book called Coming Up for Air and the CEO and founder of a company called Leverage. And on your LinkedIn profile, you describe yourself as a serial entrepreneur. So would you like to just introduce yourself in a minute or two in the way you would if you bumped into someone at some kind of business networking event and you didn't have 45 minutes of undivided attention for the introduction?
Sure. So my name is Nick, and I run a company called Leverage. We help teams and organizations get more efficient, and we train them and consult them on best practices that we've developed over the years on not just how best to use all the collaborative tools available now, like Slack, Asana, Microsoft Teams, Gmail, Notion, all these tools. No one's ever been taught when and how to best use them. And so at Leverage, we help train and consult teams, not just how, but when to use these tools, what's the purpose of them? Because knowing when to use a tool and when not to use a tool is the first step. Because if you know how to use a tool, but your whole team has different ideas of the purpose of it, that's what causes a scavenger hunt. And we end up saving about a full business day a week per employee in companies we found. And so that's the core of my book. I'm also an author. That would be in my intro. And it's called Come Up for Air, How Your Team Can Leverage Systems and Tools to Stop Drowning in Work. And I've also got a podcast and do speaking and a whole bunch of other things.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for the introduction. And I came across you because you were being interviewed on someone else's podcast, and you described a fairly traumatic business experience you had that partially led you into what you're doing now. And again, I think it's much better if you describe it than me. Well, so tell us about the business you were doing before this one, and what went horribly wrong, and how did you fix it?
Yeah. Well, I'll back up and talk about one. My original career was in high frequency trading. So my background is I'm a financial engineer, mathematician. I would build algorithms and code computers to trade stocks at high frequency speed. So in that space, you really developed a muscle and a sense of the value of time, because a microsecond could literally mean millions. And at a young age, I did quite well. And after about 8 years, I took a jump into startups, and always around, this concept of time, which I've been passionate about. And my very first one was an app in the scheduling space. And then after that, I developed a freelancer marketplace to do tasks and projects for people. And I had a business partner at the time. And that's the business that you're referring to. And we had this external success. We grew to about $1 million or 7 figures in the first year, revenue, 150 people on the team, which all sounds impressive. But under the hood, there was a ton of problems. So, for example, we were losing about $500,000 a year and had $750,000 of debt. And a lot of our revenue growth was because, we were able to get 20% new clients in every month because we were good at marketing. But we had some broken aspects to the delivery of our services, and we were losing 15% of clients each month. So net, we were growing 5%. And also, to make matters worse, our org chart for 150 people was he was the head of people and I was the head of non-people. So we did some stuff smart, but there's a lot of mistakes. We got over our skis. And one day we were having coffee and working together. We were a fully remote company, so we didn't always work together. And he tapped me on the shoulder and he says that he's leaving. Not in 2 weeks or 2 days. He's literally leaving in 2 minutes. And, I go white and I'm thinking to myself, my God, we're going to go bankrupt. And because, back to the org chart, he was the head of people. Literally, no one knew who I was. Of our 500 clients, maybe 2 knew who I was. And of our 150 team members, maybe half a dozen knew who I was. Like, that's how much we kind of separated things. And so when he left, within 3 months, we lost about 40% of clients. And I'm cashing out my 401k. My dad's taking a second mortgage on his house.
Oh my God.
To help make payroll, bank accounts getting frozen. It was pretty bad. I mean, as an entrepreneur, we all have, our story and our battle wounds. And this is just mine. And I had to make a decision: do I bankrupt the company or do I try to fix this? And so I saw the path to cleaning things up. I could see where we were wasting a lot of time and opportunity. And that's the start of my framework that I lay out in my book, and now what we're doing at Leverage. But I started seeing very quickly things starting to turn around, and people started reaching out to me, asking me to consult them on their operations. And so I got to work with Tony Robbins and Poopery and Ethereum and some interesting companies. And what ended up happening was the same stuff that was turning Leverage around was just as impactful for a famous coach, a poop spray company, or a cryptocurrency. It didn't matter the size or the industry. So I really felt like I've fallen into something here that, now we call it a framework because it's now tried and tested as a true process that's worked now with thousands of teams. And we kind of discovered kind of the needs of, what every team needs to be operationally efficient. And when you think about it, work has fundamentally changed in the last 10 years. There's new ways of work, and it's not just remote, hybrid, or whatever. There's all these new softwares available. No one's ever been taught best practice of not just how, but when to use them. And so that's ultimately why I decided to write the book, but also decided to shift the entire business away from doing freelancer marketplace tasks and projects, and now being what we are today, which is, what I'd like to call world-class at operational efficiency, training and consulting. And we see about a full business day back a week per employee if you follow this stuff.
Totally. And, we like digging a bit into the backstory. And I mean, by the way, congratulations. And it sounds like it must have been pretty traumatic because, you were obviously successful at what you did as a high frequency trader, and then to sort of be staring disaster in the face. It can't have been easy. And that shows a fair degree of resilience that not everyone has. And presumably you don't look back on those days as being the best days in your life. And here you are still smiling and looking okay.
It forced me to figure this stuff out. Without those hard times, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Right.
But still, yeah. Go on.
But I was going to say, you mentioned that you had to go to your dad or talk to your dad about financing. And if you go back a bit earlier in your life, we like to dig a bit into the backstory. And and obviously you went into coding and high frequency trading, but was it obvious to you or your family that at some stage you might be an entrepreneur, have your own setup? Or would they have been surprised to hear that when you were a teenager or younger? Or would you have been surprised to hear that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's a complete surprise. A lot of entrepreneurs have stories like where they did paper routes as a kid. At a young age, I was selling baseball cards and like figs from our fig tree around the block. So I've always been interested in kind of that spirit. As a high frequency trader, it's very, I would call it entrepreneurial, meaning, they gave me, X billion dollars to play with, and just like figure out how to make money. So it wasn't like someone was telling me every day what to do and I had deadlines each week. It was very much so like, here's your portfolio or the markets that you're responsible for, figure out how to make a business out of it. So it was kind of like running a sub business within a larger business, and I did that for 8 years. So even though it is totally different running your own company and you have to deal with people's emotions and personal preferences and a whole bunch of things, I don't think it's a shocker to anyone.
But did you say you were selling figs? I mean, we're actually quite. You were selling figs. What and baseball cards. So what was the first customer you ever had in your life? Because we're actually very interested in where do entrepreneurs come from, and these ideas don't. Were you hit by? How did that happen?
I would probably say my first customer ever must have been when I was like 2 or 3.
Okay, you win in I think you've just won in the early game.
I'd have my parents buy me popsicles, and then I'd go and sell them to my aunt and uncle.
Seriously?
Okay, so you had it. You had the bug from the beginning. I'd like to talk about the event a little bit that you just described, and I don't know if there's any limitations of what you can say or anything that you But anyway, obviously don't say whatever you can't say or don't want to say. But like on that moment when you were co-founder, I imagine he was a co-founder, the other guy. Yeah. At the moment when the co-founder taps you on the shoulder and says, "I'm out in 2 minutes," like what happens? Like what does that actually mean? Like this is like, I'm giving you all my shares and this is your problem. I'm walking away from this and I don't like
In this
care
case, he just
about...
completely walked away and said, "I want you to buy me out," and then walked away. And then it was like, it's like going through a divorce. I think different people, there's no kind of framework for how those things work, but the way it happened with me wasn't, I would say, ideal or easy to deal with.
Well, yeah, because it's a gigantic problem. No, I mean, my first impression was like, the way you framed at least the scenario. I mean, if he wasn't going to be like, "Here, just take my shares and whatever," like, why wouldn't you walk away? I mean, like, because then you took all the risk and all the, financial burden and all that on yourself. I mean, it seems crazy. I mean, actually.
Yeah, a lot of people thought I was crazy. I guess the reasons why I didn't. One, we owed like $750,000 worth of services to people that I knew and people within circles. So I didn't think it was ethical. Two, although we had a lot of broken things, we still had a 7-figure business and current clients, and we did have some stuff figured out. And I did know from experience, having, I forget what it was back then, might have been like $60,000 a month of recurring revenue or something. It's not easy to get to that. So I figured, I figured, look, there's a lot of broken stuff here, but once I fix it, at least I'm fixing something that's already, a bit up and running with some stuff that I could build momentum off of. And I like the name Leverage, so I wanted to keep that name.
And how long? So, and then like the turnaround, I mean, okay, I've been through some dramatic moments in my career as well, similar sort of like, up back against the wall, financial disaster could be on the horizon type stuff. But how long did it take you to, like, what was the process? Was it relatively quick? I mean, you did some, and did you have to let anybody go? I mean, like, what was the process actually
I know it was pretty excruciating. Well, one, the legal battle alone took like 6 to 9 months to get him fully out of the business. So that was like, it's like a divorce.
That's so annoying. I mean, that is a kindred spirit. I find that so massively annoying. I can't help it. And I'm sure, like, whatever, that probably doesn't even describe how you felt at the time, but it just seems incredibly, ridiculously unfair. Not only are you screwing me over, now you're going to fight me over it, basically.
Well, and then, the amount of legal bills too, and like on top of all the problems you got, then you got to pay lawyers. I mean, it was tough. There was a lot of stuff that I had to do in that period of time. Like, one, change the way that we worked, and how we collaborate, and which, was a genesis of my framework. One of the things I talk about in the book too is how complexity scales exponentially with team size. And it's one of the motivations for being more efficient, because it can allow you to not need to hire as many people as you might think you need to hire, and getting extra 20 to 40% out of every person in your team is far cheaper, more cost effective, and less headache than just throwing more bodies, right? You have to pay for recruiting, onboarding, training, pay a salary, and it's literally exponentially more complex to manage, each additional person on your team. So one of the things that we did too, because there was a lot of fractional people, it was, how do we get rid of kind of the bottom, the bottom part. And a lot of people also self-selected. There was rumors that we were going to go bankrupt. So there was just a lot of people that just are like, I don't think that you're going to be around in a month. I'm going to leave. So between the self-selection and then, how do we get our best people to full utilization and, simplify things, so cutting the team rapidly got from like 150 to 50 within a couple months.
Okay.
Right.
And that's huge.
That was huge from inefficiency and, just, one person to be responsible for 150 people. I mean, 50 people still is way too much, but 150 is really impossible. So we quickly did that. How do we put out some of the fires that we had? How do we stop doing certain services that were tripping us up? The counterintuitive thing that I did that people thought a lot of people thought I was crazy for not bankrupting. Then they thought I was even more crazy for this, which was I stopped marketing and sales during a period where we were losing 40% revenue, which was counterintuitive. But another thing, aside from my CPR framework that I developed, which is, what we keep talking about in the book, I also started realizing this thing I call ACR. Every company has attraction, conversion, and retention. And a lot of businesses, including myself, make the mistake going left to right, where, you're really trying to build up that email list and market and all these things. But what's the point of attracting more people if you can't convert them? And what's the point of converting them if you can't retain them?
Exactly.
So kind of a core principle I developed was like, we should go right to left and not go one more box over to the left until the previous one is correct. So I decided to shut off the A and the C, the attraction and conversion, until we got our retention really high.
Okay.
And I basically told the team, if we can't fix retention before we go to zero, then, that sucks. But there's no business if we can't deliver high quality services to people as measured by retention. We don't have a business anyway to support. So once we kind of got retention, it's like, okay, well now, how can we convert, the people that have just kind of been coming in and falling on our plate, how do we convert them? And then after those two things, it's like, okay, now how do we get back in front of people and do some of the marketing activities that we know work? But kind of going in that order was an expensive lesson to learn that now is a core principle with how I run companies.
Yeah, and we're obviously going to have a bit of time on the book, but I would encourage anyone listening to this, because I actually have read the book, and that isn't something that I always do, and I of the books I read, they're not always ones I strongly recommend. But I'd say absolutely genuinely, you've got a few insights there that I haven't seen elsewhere. Which our audience tends to either be entrepreneurs or people who are thinking about being entrepreneurs, and there's so much value in some of the insights in the book. So don't we will come to that. But I wanted to talk about the way you dealt with people. That you mentioned that your co-founder was the people guy and you were the systems or the doing everything else guy. And was it something you had to learn, or did you have naturally? Are you good with people? Because now you come across as being sort of a good interpersonal skills. I mean, you don't come across as one of these sort of geeky programmer types who can't deal with humans. And is that something you've learned, or did you just have it and weren't using it? Sorry to ask a direct question, but it's for our audience, not.
I guess I've always my default is I'm an introvert, and my relative strength is more putting on some headphones and thinking deeply about a complex problem. It's not sitting there and listening to someone's issues or problems and being able to show really strong. I mean, it's a skill that I've definitely gotten stronger at, but it's not my unique ability. My unique ability, is problem solving and math and understanding. Kind of what made me successful as a high frequency trader is I'm good at understanding the rules of a game, and then understanding all the tools available to me, how do I win the game. And that's kind of how I approach all this. I understand all the different technologies available and aspects and dimensions to teams collaborating, and how do we take all this stuff that's available and put it together in a certain way to kind of win. Where winning in this context is saving time and reducing the friction and scavenger hunt. I've always been social, so I've always been a little bit not the typical. When I did my master's in financial engineering, I kind of stuck out like a sore thumb a bit. I wasn't the typical profile in those programs, but still, it's not my baseline norm to be I would say a people person where I'm super understanding and patient and all those things.
So you really had to get out of your comfort zone. In multiple dimensions, you had the legals, you
I'm
had the
still getting out of my comfort zone.
I was going to ask what your motivation, because on the one hand, your focus, because one of the things for people who haven't read the book, which I guess is most of our listeners at this stage, is you talk about focusing on team productivity rather than individual productivity. And it's a very important insight that an awful lot of time management books is all about how Richard or how Kimon can be effective, not how do I get a bunch of people being effective. And so that's an important important dimension to it. But you obviously did manage to deal with all those people like somehow. But that wasn't a problem for you. I mean, even if it wasn't what you're good at or not your key strength, you did manage to. You did obviously manage to do that, or are you glad to leave it behind? And sorry, the follow-up question I was going to ask was, like, doing what you're doing now is really much putting yourself in the spotlight, and you're becoming a kind of public figure. You've got a best-selling book. You're giving a lot of talks. You're out there more. And is that because you believe in the idea so much, or do you have that sort of desire? Let's say you're quite famous now. Do you have a desire to be, on the front pages of magazines and to be a guru, or where are you taking this?
Well, I don't know how to what degree I would say I'm famous or anything like that. No, I honestly don't care if anyone knows who I am. The only purpose why I'm doing these things is, if it helps spread the message and ultimately help us win, with what we're doing on a company basis, right? And so these podcasts and talks and all those things, I don't do any of it for ego or anything like that. It's really just what's the most effective and efficient way to kind of spread the message and the word, and, you could do Facebook ads, you could do other things, but I found this to be a more efficient and effective kind of way of getting the word out. Mm-hmm. And, it was uncomfortable doing, it's not my natural, way of being. So it's definitely been, threw myself in the deep end and just did enough of them where now, it's comfortable. It's, in a lot of ways actually fun. Like I actually enjoy it now, but yeah, for a while it wasn't.
Well, let me ask a question that helps with the actual goals that you're trying to achieve. I have run a couple companies, and this has been, the problem that you solve, I think, has been something that, okay, let's put it this way. Here, can you go and check what software is available to do this and that? And so you have people on your team running around, and then there's, within your team you have, and I'm sure you know all this, and I'm going to allow you to whatever to talk based on your consulting experience, but like have all these people on my team are like, they have their opinions, they're stakeholders, we're looking for this. I'm like, it's for my personal interest, or no, my department needs this or that, or Salesforce is the best, or whatever the top number one, whatever name in the bracket is the best. And like, man, I could have used a certain, and I'm not saying this to whatever kowtow to whatever you're doing. I genuinely could have used this kind of help to actually have this outsourced to somebody else and to say, look, here's what we do. What are the tools? Now, as you said, I've been doing business for a while. A lot of these tools have come, like a lot of these really good tools have come up in the last, let's say 5 to 10 years. So maybe not, maybe they weren't all available, but still that problem and that process, I suspect, is going on everywhere in the world still today, basically. So how do you work? And then like, how does it, like, talk to these people like me, like I would have been in those situations. Like, what are we supposed to do about this situation?
Well, one, you have to know that you have a problem. You have to be aware of the problem, because it's hard to solve a problem if you're not even aware of it, and prioritize it. And so, one, think about time similar to like how you'd think of like a stock, right? Like you can, or money, let's say, like you can invest, you can spend money, you could go and, buy a hot chocolate and you've like spent money, or you can invest money and put money in like the stock market, hoping that you're going to get a return on investment. And it's the same with time. You can spend time, like we can go watch TV now or watch paint dry on a wall. Or you can invest time, right? Which means like we sacrifice a bit of time now to improve a foundation so that tomorrow or next week, we never have to do that activity again, or that process is just a little bit faster, but now it's in perpetuity. And just like you have return on time investment, you have return on time. And the investment that you spend fixing something, after a certain number of days or weeks or months, you break even on that investment, and then you're in the positive. And so I think the first step is to think about the problem in that way, because that's the right way of thinking about it. And then, how big of a pain is this? How big of an opportunity do you think you have to fix this compared to all your alternatives, right? Because if you invest your time fixing this, say like in general, fixing someone's email, getting people to inbox zero is a couple hours of time that saves 3 to 5 hours a week after that. It's a really, really, really high return on time. There's probably nothing else that you could do that would be a better use of time, better use of energy and resources than that. Other things might take a month, and then after that month, you're saving, 2 hours a week or something, right? Not full time in that month. Say it takes you 10 hours in a month to fix something, and now you're saving two hours a week. Well, after 5 weeks, you've broken even. That's pretty good too, right? But maybe if you fix your sales funnel, that's going to generate an immediate $100,000 next week for you. So this time stuff, the tricky thing is it's a bit less visible, and it's a bit more invisible. So you have to kind of just gauge and survey and kind of guesstimate a little bit how much time you're saving with things. It's not like you're going to see dollars in a bank. So that's the tricky thing people have to get around. And that's why it kind of sometimes is lost in the past to something to do with marketing or sales, which you more directly can tie to revenue, even if time is money. And if you get 20% more out of everyone in your company and you know what your payroll is, you can do the math yourself.
I think you've done a very good job of identifying something that's so important. I'm surprised. I would say that one thing, Nick, is that I think it could well be much more than 20% better perform. You talk about you bring in extra. That I would say that any new business, I've started a lot of businesses and had many disasters, a few successes. But what I would want to have someone like you as a co-founder, because I think a business could be like 5 times more efficient, not 20% more efficient, but 5 or 10 times more efficient with your mindset. And maybe, and obviously, I'm giving you a chance to sort of like slightly blow your own trumpet, but it's more than there's more than 20% at stake here, isn't it?
It's way more. I just like to be conservative with people, so that because 20% is just like it's super easy, and that's already such a big impact where this stuff should just be a no-brainer. But here's another perspective that might shift mindset a bit. Say you work a 40-hour week and you spend 35 hours on email, responding to messages, scheduling meetings, what Asana might define in their anatomy of work index as work about work. That leaves you with 5 hours a week for high value, new initiatives, deep work for, those longer term things that drive the business. If you could just even save 5 hours a week through this stuff, in general, we save much more. You've just doubled that 5 to a 10. So you've just doubled the amount of time you can now spend on those big initiatives. So actually saving about a half a day a week, you could argue could potentially, depending on the allocation of admin time and scavenger hunt, could effectively, if you look at it from that lens, double your productivity. And so, it's way more than 20%. And it's also not just time savings. This stuff also affects culture, because culture gets impacted when trust breaks down, not just when people start stealing from you, which rarely happens, but when you can't trust that, you ask Jane to get something done by Friday, it doesn't get done. It's not because Jane didn't want to, it's because she doesn't have a good system to prioritize and capture all the different things being thrown at her. And so when you start working better together and having systems to capture and prioritize, less balls get dropped. When less balls get dropped, it's not just the productivity and the output goes up, but the trust goes up and the culture goes up. And also it allows you to be a bit more lean and not need to hire as many people. So it allows you also to put a downward pressure on the complexity.
Yep. And one of the points you make in the book, you talked about the scavenger hunt, and just to clarify that you talk about how important it is to design systems for retrieval of information that a lot of people optimize just like everyone likes sending WhatsApp messages because it's so easy to send, but it's not the best way to communicate around the organization except in certain circumstances. So you've got this concept of optimize for retrieval, which reduces the amount of communication people have to find stuff out. But maybe in the big picture, in terms of your objectives, you talked about how it's not about your ego, it's not about you being famous, it's the mission. As a business, your business model, it looks like a mixture of training and consulting just based on going onto your website. That's, I mean, would you do you have a vision for like, do you want to be a huge business or do you want to persuade other consulting companies to start deploying your know-how? Do you have a sort of a clear vision of where it's going to be in 3, 5? Because the market is gigantic. Almost every SME or even big company in the world could be your client, and obviously that would be a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, no, I want to grow this into a large size, not only as large as it needs to be, but I want to maximize kind of what our reach, our revenue opportunity, and be a world class, be on that, be on the level with the big consulting players.
Okay, so you're really ambitious in that space. And are you considering anything in parallel, like having a sort of venture unit where you might only, I was thinking that if you were thinking who to invest in, you would want someone in the founder team of the company you invested in to have the kind of mindset and skills that you've got. I would imagine. Have you thought about that yet, or are you a bit busy doing what you do?
Yeah, I think one thing as an entrepreneur that was hard for me to learn is like saying no to opportunities, and like there's so many things that we all could do, but I really now I'm trying to be more mindful and strategic and get to that next milestone, and then move on, and then do the next thing. It's easy to distract yourself and try to be doing too many things and get nothing done.
Yeah,
well.
that sounds exactly like what you just said about your check the box, like make sure you get the retention, focus on the one thing at a time. That sounds like, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, exactly right. So long term, I've got ideas for some software plays with what we're doing. That's really interesting to me. I could see a scenario where there's like a private equity play where I could advise private equity firms, because like when you buy a company, you're looking at their EBITDA and those things. They're not really looking from the lens of like how inefficient are they and how quickly would it be to make them 40% more efficient, which clearly would make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
To the valuation.
Absolutely.
So I think
that's a really good way of thinking. I've been in the M&A space. That will be an attract. That's actually just a service. And I'm sure you're doing this if you've spotted it. That's a service that can be just provided to PE right away, actually.
And then beyond that, how can I partner with PE firms and get their portfolio companies on similar tech stack? So now you invest in one kind of solid stack that's going to work across a portfolio, and now you have a shared service across the portfolio. Then beyond that, how do I maybe create a PE firm at some point? And I'm identifying the opportunities, and now, I put general managers in all these things, but they're running all the companies according to my framework. And you find opportunities where they've got a good product and certain aspects, but they're just really weak on the operation side of things. So yeah,
awesome.
I got a ton of ideas, and I'm sitting on my hands.
Really cool ideas. I have a question about actually the opposite of the efficiency thing, because so then we're here. We come to, how often in your consulting, when you look at these companies, is it actually better to do nothing than it is because some of these discussions are going to be around, now again, it depends on the size of the companies, but are going to be around implementing larger scale implementations, which are not only expensive, but extremely painful to the organization. Is it ever a case where, is there ever an answer that actually it's better not to do this at all? This is going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of time, and the ROI you're going to get on it is negligible? That never happens.
There's never a not. There's just a not now. And and it depends on so many things, like what's the tech savviness of the team? How long is it going to take to adopt? If someone's losing money and they might not be able to make payroll, you might not want to document now might not be the best time to document your processes. You might have to figure out something a bit more urgent. In general, I haven't seen a company or a team where doing an inbox zero training, teaching them how to use Gmail and Outlook wasn't a smart idea immediately.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
That's just a complete no-brainer. And also, why it's a no-brainer, it's so quick. You get that return on time basically within a week versus, months or longer. Another important distinction with teaching email versus other tools, which makes it really strategic to start, is it's a single user activity, meaning even if only a fraction of the team gets on board, those that get on board get the benefit of knowing how to use it properly, versus these other collaboration tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams or Asana. They're only valuable if you have alignment across all the people using it together, right? What's the value of a cell phone if you're the only person that has a cell phone?
Exactly.
Nothing. You have no one to talk. So there's a just more complex change management aspect, and you have to be coordinated in the rollout more so than the others, right? But email, you use email one way, I can still use it my way and know how to use it properly. And, too bad for you, you're not taking advantage of it. So yeah, there's different things and different, you could teach email, you could teach Slack and Microsoft Teams, you could help roll out Asana or work management tool. You could help them roll out a company wiki or document and optimize processes. Some of those things, all of them are needed. It just might not be now. It might just be not now. Email should just be now, probably for everyone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And these other things too, most likely, with obviously there's exception, but for the most part, it's probably hard to argue that Slack or Teams or a tool like Asana or cleaning up how you're doing meetings, which is costing billions of dollars of waste a year, the way that meetings are run.
Yes.
It's hard to make an argument that anything else on your backlog of projects and initiatives would be a higher priority than those.
Do you have CRM, like Salesforce, on your list of things that you deal with? Because I find that as a not properly used, heavily.
CRMs are critical. We partner with Salesforce is its own beast, and there's an entire ecosystem around just Salesforce consultants. So we partner with people, but I'm not trying to build a Salesforce consulting.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of sort of personality types, and obviously I would imagine the market is so big that it's much better to work with people who are persuaded. I presume that's the start of most consulting engagements, is someone somewhere thought we need to talk to Nick's company or to Leverage. They hear you and they want to come to you. But then you're obviously in big tech and big implementations, you get different people, some of whom don't want to change. And how do you think, are there certain like personality types where you can see, that person's going to be not easy to work with? There are some people who are almost like hardwired not to be efficient type people, and you get some people who are sort of naturally well organized and other people who are naturally chaotic. And I rather self-indulgently say that I really have to work on myself to be well organized. I'm not a natural well organized type person, so in a way I'm speaking about myself. But do you sometimes think that this person is going to be so hard to work with, I don't think this project is going to succeed? Or can you convert?
Yeah, well, if we don't think that we'll be successful because the personality types will be too hard, we'll just say no to the project. But a big part of our business now is training. Like we've got these group trainings that we offer on each of these different tools that we're talking about. So it's no longer that it needs to be some big custom complex consulting arrangement. It could be like, hey, could you help us, a team of 20, we need to learn Asana. It's like, okay, cool. We'll do a 30-day training just on that. Most of the time, we're not really selling. Like people are coming to us and they're in pain or heard, might be listening right now, and some of what I'm saying resonates, and it's like, man, I really need this stuff. Now the rest of your team might might not feel the same way, right? So when we're working with, the decision maker, I think they're aware. And then we, for a large engagement, we have to work on the communications and the change management aspect to really explain the why. And we try to identify quick wins so that very quickly people are net positive. The time that they've invested with us is a fraction of the time that we've saved. So that builds the know, like, and trust. And it becomes just an easier conversation like, hey, I've saved you 5 hours. Could you give me 2 this week so I could teach you this next thing? You still got an extra 3 that you never had.
Nice. And in terms of, can you put a few numbers on your business, just in terms of how many people have you got, how fast are you growing? And I'm really curious, what's the largest organization you've ever worked with that you're allowed to name? And if you're not allowed to name it, then, or don't want to name it, just say it's had 25,000 employees or whatever. And have you done any ROI calculations of something truly spectacular? And what would be perfect would be like a General Motors, and you've saved them like 65,000 hours a month or something ridiculous. But can you just get any numbers to help sort of quantify what you're doing?
I don't share our company numbers, and our clients were under NDA, but I mean, I could tell you it's like, we worked with top 10 biggest companies in the US. Mm-hmm. And, and the impact is quite large, but yeah, unfortunately I can't share like specific numbers, but it's been with companies above 100,000 employees.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Is there anything we haven't asked?
Yeah, we might not work with we might not work with all 100,000. It might be select teams inside of those, because like when an organization's that big, some small random teams are bigger than 99% of most companies in the U.S. What were you saying?
I was just to say, is there anything like, I know obviously we haven't gone into detail on the book. Maybe is there other things that you think are particularly important from the book that you haven't mentioned? It's hard to summarize your entire book in like a few minutes, but like what haven't we covered that you think is really you'd like our listeners to know about that is important in your process?
There's a part where I talk about how time isn't linear, and it's not just about saving time, it's about optimizing time. And when you look at a calendar, it's not that all time slots are equal. It's more like a heat map. And, it's unique per person, but like for me, 9 a.m. on a Monday is probably my most valuable time slot on the whole week, right? Like I've had a relaxing weekend, I've woken up, worked out, had a coffee, whatever. My brain's at full horsepower at that time. Compare it to 7 o'clock on a Friday, right? Like later today, I will have probably had 100 meetings for the week. I'm going to be tired. I'm not going to be at full horsepower. If at 7 o'clock I'm in an Uber, I live in Manhattan, say I'm going down to Tribeca and I don't have Wi-Fi and I'm just on my phone and I'm tired after 100 calls, my time for that 15 minutes isn't as valuable as the first 15 minutes at 9 a.m. on a Monday. So, being aware that time isn't linear and being aware of like, what should I be doing at what time slots? What will require my brain to be at full horsepower, not at full horsepower? Then starts driving a lot of interesting decisions. For example, maybe an hour-long meeting doesn't need to be an hour. Maybe they could be 45 minutes and you have people record a Loom video and asynchronously give you that report out. Now you just save 15 minutes so you can time shift to watch that video in the back of that Uber and make higher use of the time when your brain isn't at full horsepower. And now you've just freed up 15 minutes when your brain is at full horsepower. One meeting, what I'm mostly interested in, like we said at the beginning, it's not individual productivity, but it's productivity at scale. Maybe I should start saying it like that. It's team productivity, right? So that one meeting for 15 minutes isn't going to make or break you. But if that meeting is weekly and that meeting's got 4 people on it, and say you got 50 of those meetings in a year and there's 4 people, that's 200 occurrences where you just optimized it, right? Now, how many meetings do you have, does your team have in a week, and apply that same thinking? And now thousands of meetings have just, been optimized with this new way of thinking. It starts making a meaningful impact, and it's just a mindset shift. It doesn't require fancy technology to achieve that.
Yeah, certainly that resonated, and obviously different people have different times, but that's good. Kimon, is there anything else you want to ask at all? Because I think
Are you going to Tribeca tonight?
I might. Where do you live?
I live in. Don't worry, I'm not gonna fall. I'm not gonna try to hunt you down.
Bump into each other.
I'm in Krakow, but I actually was born in New York.
Okay.
That's why. So no, I do have one last question because we have to stop. Actually, we got to be mindful of the time. Imagine, because I think about this a lot, being an entrepreneur myself. You had this job where you were doing the trading, and you're a solo guy. That was my understanding, at least. You didn't have a team of people. It was dependent. Your results were dependent on yourself.
You have a team, but I mean, there's a lot of individual contribution.
Yeah, it sounded like it was a lot of, it's more of like you're responsible for this project, but this project's you. And then where now you're running or you're running a company, a sizable company, and you're responsible for all these people and all this stuff. And I just wonder, do you ever miss, I know you're probably going to say, no, I love doing, managing people and it's the best part, but because I when you deal with a lot of people, at some point you're like, man, I just like, it's also kind of nice to just have to take care of yourself and your own stuff and, not be responsible for all these people. I just wonder if you ever think about that.
Yeah, no, there's aspects of high frequency that I really miss. And one big one was, being able to just really focus on like one really tough problem for an extended period of time. And, running a company, writing a book, like we've got all these initiatives. So I'm just, switching between a million things all the time. So I think that I'll be able to kind of in the next 6 months get back to a little bit more freed up. I need to find some extra time myself,
run a project on yourself.
Yeah, I would like to get to a point like where I could go back and start doing a bit more deep thinking, which is it's just impossible when you've just launched a book and you're just in that mode.
Okay. Yeah, well, I would strongly encourage anyone who's either running an organization or thinking of running one to take a good look at Nick's business and the book, and it made a lot more sense than most of the books that cross my desk. And I think if
thank
there
you
are
for reading it.
Well, no, it was really good. And if there are other books and links, and I'm sure you're aware of some of the big people in this field, like Cal Newport and deep. I noticed you talked about deep work, but if there are other things that you think people who listen to you would enjoy reading, if you zip them over in an email afterwards, we'll add that to the show notes as well. Obviously, maybe you just say just read my book and that's all you need to do. But I mean, it doesn't seem like that kind of guy. The only thing I would say is that if at some stage you're looking at that private equity idea and you're interested in any extra capital, I would be please give me a call. I think it's a great idea, and I think that deploying efficiency, and you're not the first person to think of this, but deploying efficiency on companies that are being acquired and baking it in from the start in startups is something that people pay way too little attention to.
Maybe we bump this project higher up. How much you want to give me?
Well, I think that's not a conversation to have. Billions, and anyone who sends in 10 million, we'll cut in the listeners. No, but I mean, it's you live in New York, don't you? Is that right? You live in New York. Yeah. Well, maybe at some stage, if you're in Europe, we could have a coffee. But I think it's a big opportunity, but I suspect you should probably focus on the consulting company for the next few months at least. Yeah.
One thing at a time. Well, thanks for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks very much indeed.